I'm Everton de Oliveira, the Professor Agua from the Groundwater Project. And I'm very pleased to bring you another great book. I had a lot of fun reading this book. I do recommend that to you guys. I read all the books that we release, and this especially gave me a lot of pleasure on reading. Some books, we have the pleasure of the knowledge we get from it. Some books we get the pleasure during the learning process. And this offers us both. That's very good. The book is called KARST, Environment and Management of Aquifers. It's a great book, lots of nice pictures. I do recommend you to go on that. And I have the pleasure to bring to you Zoran Stefanovic. Zoran Stefanovic is a retired professor and head of the Center for Karst Hydrogeology at the Department of Hydrogeology of the University of Belgrade, Faculty of Mining and Geology in Serbia. John Gunn is an honorary professor in the School of Geography, Earth and Environmental Sciences, University of Birmingham in UK. He's an emeritus professor at the University of Huddersfield, UK, and managing director of Limestone Research and Consultancy Limited. Also, Nico Goldscheider. Nico is a professor for hydrogeology at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, KAT, in Germany. And Natasha, finally, last but not the least, Natasha Ravbar. She's an associate professor at the KARST Research Institute, ZRC, Sazu, Slovenia. Very good. Welcome of you. Congratulations for your lovely contribution. I suspect I love the book. Please tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you have gathered, put the team together for this enterprise. Please, who's first? Zoran?
Okay, if I have to start, first of all, I would like to thank you for your nice words. I will be one of these readers, definitely, again. Why? Because simply there is almost 1 year now since we completed our work, and we are still standing in the queue waiting to see the book in the open access. Yeah, which is quite normal, because we are very happy for this, because we know that so many books are at the moment in this queue, and it is not easy really to manage all this.
Exactly.
I remember I had the first interview with you, I think it was 3 years ago. I was among the first who responded on the idea to have a groundwater project and to have an open access edition, which is a fantastic idea, and we will very much appreciate it to be a part of that. Now, to say a few words about us, we are a team. We are all coming from the different institution. We have a different specialization, in fact, but this is how we also found that will be great to somehow split our specialization and responsibilities in writing these chapters of the book. However, we are all belong to the one same commission. This is a KARST Commission of the International Association of Hydrogeologists, and we are working together on several projects, and still we are cooperating in one of the newly started project on the registration of the most important karst springs in the world. So we are, by our specialization, all dealing with the karst. In my case, I am 40 years of my career, all the time was in karst, because I'm coming from a karst region, from one of the 6 countries of the former Yugoslavia, where the karst is highly developed, well karstified, and there are plenty of features. And as an engineer or a geologist, you must deal all the time with the specific problems and dealing with this. So my thesis was also in master, and PhD was also related to karst. I was a professor teaching also, and have behind me now 12 doctorates, majority of them also with the karst. So let's give a chance to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Okay. Well, my background, I'm a caver. Basically, I love caves, everything to do with caves. So I've been caving for some 50 years, and I chose my undergraduate university so that it had a caving club, I did my undergraduate dissertation on percolation in caves. That was at Aberystwyth University in Wales. From there, I was able to go with a Commonwealth scholarship to study with Paul Williams in New Zealand, looking at caves. From there, I was able to go to Trinity College in Dublin with David Drew and to look at, you've guessed it, caves. So basically, I've worked on the cave side very much, and I like to think of myself as somebody who studies lots of different disciplines, but all within the context of caves and karsts. So I have an interest in the geomorphology of caves, how they formed, the movement of water in the caves, and the management of caves and caving environment, the heritage, the geoheritage, essentially cave focused, you could say. And as well, I also work in the Cave and Karst Working Group, which is in the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you very much. Nico, next.
Yeah, I just had to check quickly who is number 3 in the list of authors. I think Zoran summarized very well what was the spirit of the book and how the team of authors gathered together. I just can add a few points. Well, John described himself mainly as a caver. I also love caves, but I think I'm mainly a hydrogeologist dealing with hydrogeology, groundwater, water resources, also often related to ecology, ecosystems, water-dependent ecosystems. And I've worked in many regions of the world, but I have also a very strong focus on alpine karst systems. I worked a lot in alpine and high mountain environments. And concerning our team of authors, Zoran mentioned correctly that we work together, and we are still working together in several projects. I would like to mention some. I think we have already previously published together 2 other books, one on the large springs in the world, one on engineering and water resources management in karst regions. In both cases, Zoran was the lead author, but others contributed. And then we had the World Karst Aquifer Mapping Project, where we produced together the first world map of karst aquifers. I think we will speak about that later a little bit. And also recently a project on the karst aquifer resources availability and quality in the Mediterranean region. This was also an important project where 3 of us worked together.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Natasha, so you're from Slovenia, the beautiful country. I know very well your country. Very good. Congratulations for your book. Please tell a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all the effort. I would also like to thank the initiators of this book and also the co-authors who invited me to participate. My background is geography, but then I was somehow involved also in caving, and this attracted me more. So I devoted my PhD studies in karstology. It's a special PhD program here in Slovenia, because we consider ourselves as a cradle of karstology and also a place of the classical karst. All the features that are described in the book are like school cases from our country, among others, of course. Then during my studies, and I already started to work as a researcher, young researcher at the Karst Research Institute in Postojna in Slovenia. And my main interests are in water flow in karst, and also the importance of karst aquifers as water resources, their protection and vulnerability. But I'm also interested in in special features of karst polias. These are depressions that are frequently flooded. So you can also see at my background picture one of such floods. I'm studying these floods, how do they occur, why do they occur, and so on. Yes, like my colleagues described, we did work together before. Actually, when I was started to study karst and so on, I was also inspired by the books of my colleagues, John, Zoran, and Nico was my supervisor. So we are a team that we know each other for a long time, and I'm really honored to be now part of the team.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Natasha. Guys, with your book, I would like to start backwards. What about the additional 100,000 words the readers will be presented to with your book? I really enjoyed it. Tell us who's going to jump in.
The idea there, as you've said, is it's commonly said a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we felt that was particularly important with karst, because if we look back at the history of the subject, a lot of the theories really stemmed from people who were just working in one particular area. So the people who were working up in the high Alps had one perhaps perception of what is karst, and that was very different to the people who were working, let's say, in Mammoth Cave, where they had a very long, almost horizontal cave underneath an environment with thick soil covers. And we've been very lucky between us to have traveled across the world, many different countries. And we thought it would be a really good idea to try and give the readers a sort of flavor of the variety of karst that's out there, so that you don't just think of karst as being one particular narrow thing, but rather something that's broad, that's present across the world in a whole series of different settings. And these photographs they're all taken by the team. So we've entirely used our own photographs and our own experience. And we want to just, as I say, give that idea so that people can say, well, you know, I don't really know what one of these features is. Sure, we've got photographs in the text, but we wanted to bring these extra ones at the end. And we hope that you've enjoyed sort of looking at those. I've certainly enjoyed trying to help pull them together with colleagues, obviously. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see what the response to that is.
I hope. Well, I really enjoy them. Many of them I've seen already in the place, and it's very nice. I love it. So you mentioned that your book is targeting readers not familiar with karst, as well as those who have already studied the subject. From my personal experience, the intricacies and complexities of karst sort of scared me when I was, starting my career. I confess that it still haunts me here and there because of the difficulties of working with karst. How do you present the subject to make it friendlier to people like me, the wimp ones?
Who's taking that one, Zoran? Do you want to?
Natasha, would you like to respond?
Yes,
I think
Natasha,
you're the youngest among, and you will stay youngest, and with your experience, how you will see this subject?
Yeah, so really the karst is a really specific landscape. It has got peculiar geomorphological features on the surface and in the underground, but special characteristic is the hydrological specificity, which considerably differs from other non-karst environments. The water mainly flows under the surface and through the network of solution conduits. But there is also different types of karst, which may not be so spectacular. The common feature is that they are posing special challenges to the people living on karst and people studying karst. It functions as a 3D space, and also this makes it vulnerable. So I think to see it from this way, it also poses many open questions. And although there has been a great improvement in research and studying of these environments, there is still a lot of space to be discovered. And I think this is the main which intrigued me as a student, and I hope also others will see it this way.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you allowed me to add a few words, maybe.
Please.
In fact, our team, I have accounted that we are almost 130 years of experience. I will exclude Natasha for the moment, of course.
I'm glad you didn't include me there
even
because the
without
numbers.
her. So within experience, with this experience, so you can do, I think, almost everything. So to make a book, which is almost mission impossible, to make a book for non-KARST specialists, for for the students as well, and for the young professionals too. So it is really looks like a mission impossible. But we try our best, really, to make things in the simple possible way that everybody could read, that those who are a specialist in the issue maybe find something which is new for them, some new experience, but also for those who are not familiar with the karst and even geology, that they will be able to understand our language, and with the beautiful photos, sketches, and so will get an idea. Of course, they cannot be, this is important, everybody who complete this book reading, he cannot be specialist in karst. He must call specialists to deal with the problems, but he will be able to understand environment, and maybe in one that he is living with.
I totally agree. Well, you cannot be a specialist in one with only one book, but at least you show the ways very clearly. I think it was enjoyable to read. It's like usually a technical book. You have to take a deep breath before you start, but this you don't need. You just jump in and you can read easily. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. So your book, you present impressive karst number, like 15+% of the planet's land surface is karst. 25% of the population is relying totally or partially on karst waters, and so on. The numbers are very, very impressive. Don't we need more people studying and working with karst in the world?
Well, concerning these numbers, in fact, they come from the World Karst Aquifer Mapping Project, where we also previously worked together for several years. From this project, we know that 15.2% of the global ice-free land surface consists of carbonate rocks, which are potential karst aquifers. The largest percentage is in Europe, nearly 22%, and the largest absolute surfaces occur in Asia, with more than 8 million square kilometers. However, concerning these 25% of population relying on karst, this is a very old and highly cited estimation, but we know today that it's an overestimation. In fact, our lead author, Zoran Stevanovic, presented a much more accurate and recent estimation. Now the numbers are less impressive, but still important. It's now nearly 700 million people, or 9 to 10% of the world's population, relying on water from karst. But concerning your core question, do we need more people? I think for sure we need very well-trained people, because karst hydrogeology is a complicated and also versatile subject, and we need an interdisciplinary approach. I mean, hydrogeology always involves geology and hydrology, but we also need very good and strong math for our models, and physics, chemistry, because karstification is a chemical process, but also we have to consider the ecological, microbiological aspects. And what we surely need is more public and also professional awareness for the specific nature and specific vulnerability and protection needs of karst systems.
I totally agree. I think from my experience, when we go to congresses or events, we see that we don't have as many KARST specialists in hydrogeologists, especially. We don't have as we need. I totally agree with you, and I hope your book and I believe your book would draw attention to that and bring more people into KARST, because it's a very nice starting book. And actually, not only starting book, you have in-depth information as well. Very good, very good. Thank you. About the Natasha mentioned a little bit, but KARST landscape are usually dramatic. You know, it's a tourist attraction. How is that? What are Karen, dolines, karst, valleys, polys, and all the things that you present in your book? Because it's, like I told before we started recording this, I mentioned to Zoran, I'm planning to organize some sort of touristic or tour guide for karst regions, because it's so nice to visit, and when you understand, it's even better. Please.
Yes, first I would like to stress that there are different types of karst in the world. It mainly depends on the geological settings, climate settings, but also some other environmental characteristics. Yes, and some of them are spectacular, nice to take photo and so on, with great geodiversity. Like some features you already mentioned, the depressions like collapsed dolines, Tiankungs from China, big collapsed dolines, huge. Or maybe some big springs, like for example, in the Mediterranean area, or some big caves. But you know, not all of the karst types have such spectacular and photogenic features. Some of them you might not even notice that you are on the karst, for example, with some chalk settings or something like that. But I would like to stress that also such karst types might have very strongly pronounced hydrological characteristics that are equal to all these types of karst, meaning that we have to be careful when we plan some human activities, because, for example, if I illustrate, even small cave is actually an anthropogenic term. It's a space in the underground when a human can enter. While if we cannot enter, it doesn't mean that it cannot conduct water. Even small cavities with few centimeters in diameter can conduct equally fast water towards the springs, and can result in very high transit times and contaminant transport. And this is what we need to be careful of. And another thing that I would like to stress, our book is mainly addressing water issues, which are one of the most important assets of karst. But there are also other important benefits that we get from it, not only water for drinking purposes, but also as it's an important regional water budget. It's also important economically for irrigation, for example, or for some electrical production. Or like you mentioned, that you would like to organize some travel trips. So for tourism, for local economy, it's also very important, but also for some of the karst provide very unique habitats with high biodiversity. And this is the environment where other creatures depend on the same water. So that is why it's also important to preserve the quality of the water and the quantity, of course.
Well, maybe concerning this aspect also of underground biodiversity, we know that there is some biodiversity, some life in all types of aquifers, but in alluvial aquifers, there are only very small invertebrates and bacteria. In karst water, we even find vertebrates like fish or amphibians. So the biodiversity, the underground biodiversity in karst areas is really very important. And that's a major reason also why we need this holistic approach for the protection of karst systems.
Good. Agree. So what about caves? Maybe John will jump first.
Yes, you guessed it. I think though at the start, I just echo what Natasha said, in that not all karst has got caves, and that is really important, because in the past there's been a lot of people who said that limestone areas aren't karst because there aren't any caves in them, and that's totally wrong. And we've stressed that in the book, that you can have rapid groundwater movement and pollution without caves. But caves are the special part of karst, in the sense that what other aquifer can we actually go into and see it in its natural state from the inside? Now, you can go into tunnels that have been made by humans, and you can use the tunnels to gain information about any rock type, but they're not natural. Caves are natural features. And I find this, it's fascinating. Each year I take our master's hydrogeology students into a wild cave, and most of them have never been in a cave before. It's extraordinary. They've never even been in a show cave. And when they can see the variety of different routes that water is entering the cave, they can understand the heterogeneity of the karst. So the caves are really important for that. And of course, we have many show caves across the world. You don't have to be a sporting caver to go into caves. And I'd encourage any hydrogeologist to visit, at the very least, their nearest tourist cave. Go in there and look at what the water is actually doing in that cave. Now, there's also an interesting area that's developing very rapidly at the moment, and that's the difference between epigenic and hypergenic caves. And of course, the epigenic, basically, they're water going down from the surface, but the hypergenic reflect water rising and dissolving the limestone. And they said that they're a particularly important one for hydrogeologists in terms of regional groundwater flow. And so the two cave types, sometimes they can look quite similar. One of the problems is you can get an originally hypergenic cave. It's formed at depth, but then it's what we get what we call epigenic overprinting, because it's now up in the vadose zone and it's been subject to those processes. But my point would be very simply that caves allow us to explore the inside of the aquifer, and therefore we've got something that no other hydrogeologist has.
Very good, very good. I like because your book is very visual, and I like visual stuff too when we're learning. And that's very true. And when you were talking, I was thinking about that, because we can actually see the aquifer. It's very rare that we can be within the aquifer to understand it. That's a good point. So talking about aquifers, how to approach and characterize karst aquifers compared to porous media and like fractured ones?
Yeah, I think a major characteristic of karst aquifers is the presence of a hydraulically connected network of conduits and caves that are embedded in and draining the surrounding fractured rock matrix. And there is rapid and generally turbulent flow and also rapid contaminant transport in these conduits. And the flow is often oriented towards springs, often large springs, which have a high variability of discharge, but also water quality, chemical and microbial water quality. And this implies a lot of challenges for water management, but also in terms of investigation methods. many very conventional and well-established approaches and methods from porous media hydrogeology, such as Darcy's law, fundamental law of porous media hydrogeology, simply doesn't apply to karst aquifers. So we need a whole other set of methods, or specifically adapted methods. And a very important example, of course, are tracer tests, groundwater tracer tests, where we can really identify and quantify underground connections of over distances of kilometers or tens of kilometers, or in some cases even more than 100 kilometers.
Yeah, it is definitely a different approach, and it is, I think we get a very good view from your book, because we have the overview of the things. Very nice. So
I mean, just to add maybe a few words to Nico perfectly explain, yeah, I mean, why we not apply usually Darcy law and all these things, which is following. But the point is that we are in our lecturing with the students, we always make this distinction between the other type of the aquifers and the karst, because simply Darcy law is asking for a homogeneous system, and you know, in a one karstic system, in one same conduit, in fact, you have a different length, different diameters in the sections, and it's a heterogeneous and anisotropic, and you cannot simply apply. But that does not mean that we are sometime doing the classical pumping tests and calculation of the transmissivity and so. But the point is, we put this in the book, is just to use for an orientation and for comparison between, for instance, the section inside the karst, because sometimes we have a very highly karstified section, and just next to it we have a block which is completely impervious. So this is the point, and this is how, in fact, we have always problem somehow to explain to students how to deal with all this. Yeah.
very good, thank you. So what about the karst management? Nico was just mentioning. It's not easy for, that's my experience with management, water management in general. Very little very few hydrogeologists working in water management in general. So when we talk about karst, even less, right? So
you are completely right. Yeah, you are completely right. But exactly what is the point? One of the idea of such a book is exactly, it is an address to water managers to understand the complexity of the karst, and then call specialists to deal with the problems. Because after reading these books, if they will try to make something in engineering projects or similar, it comes sometime to the failures. In fact, engineering is necessary, and that should be done always in a sustainable way. And this is exactly our idea. Let's make something that we make those who are reading understand complexity of the karst, to understand why we have, for instance, such enormous amount of water discharging on the spring, and in the same spring during the autumn or winter months, almost no water, just because this dynamic regime of a karst is one of the specifics. Or if you go to the high altitudes in the mountains, the water table is very deep, and you need a real expert to explain how to search for the water, how to make the tracing tests, how to deal with all these aspects, and then come to some sustainable solution. Or for instance, I work in a third world in several countries as a UN expert, and whenever we were there drilling the wells, and so immediately when the groundwater appeared in the surface, everybody jumped to say, "Oh, we solved the problem. We can pump for all our purposes." The list of the purposes are very long, for irrigation, for drinking, for maybe producing electricity, and so and so. But in fact, all this can go to the deterioration of the water resources, and in fact go to the over extraction. So everything should be done in a very careful way, sensitive, and with the participation and in fact with the chair of the experts in this project. And experts are in fact hydrogeologists.
Thank you. That's exactly why I asked you the question. Thank you very much. I have this experience because when we're working with water management, you know, people don't understand, and it's hard for us to get through, you know, to get the idea through them. It's not easy. But I think you've done a good job in your book. It's very well prepared and presented. That. Thank you very much. So, like I said, your book is very encompassing, and the theme is presented in a neat and passionate way. I can see that from the reading, right? As I say, I could interview you for a long time. Unfortunately, we don't have this time. I have a final question. What about the carbon emission that we talked today? Is this CO2 affecting KARST? Should we have specific care? What do you think?
Well, in fact, CO2 plays a key role in the KARST process because it's really the CO2 in the water that dissolves the limestone. And for this reason, KARST processes are also an important sink, an important natural sink for atmospheric CO2, for anthropogenic CO2 in the atmosphere. And it has also been shown that KARST systems covered with a soil cover with healthy and active soil and healthy vegetation are more efficient carbon sinks than just bare limestone outcrops. And this is also another reason why we should study KARST systems more intensely, and why we also need this holistic protection approach also for the CO2 sink.
Very good. Can you explain a little bit about the chemistry of why the CO2 is important? Some people might be interested in.
Well, the general equation for limestone dissolution is that limestone plus water plus CO2 dissolves the limestone and transforms it into calcium cations and hydrogen carbonate, bicarbonate anions in the water. So the CO2 goes in, but at the end we have some dissolved inorganic carbonate in the water, which is, I would say, harmless. So this process is a sink for CO2, and it has been shown that it is an important, relevant sink.
I think one of the important things is to stress, though, that KARST is very complicated in this respect. So although we've increased the carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, and so a very small increase in carbon dioxide, 0.03 to 0.04, compared with the 3 to 4% in the soil. So you'd think that an increase in carbon dioxide would increase the dissolution of limestone, but the dissolution of limestone varies with temperature. So if we have global warming, then that's going to have a different effect on the dissolution rate. And if we have a change, if we, for example, change the climate regime, so we're changing the vegetation, the soil CO2, the carbon dioxide in the soils, is very much more important than the CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's a wider question. You could do a whole book on how the global climate change impacts on KARST. And as something else that's commonly forgotten is that we dissolve limestone and that takes carbon dioxide in, but we also precipitate limestone as tufa and as speleothems in caves, and that gives carbon dioxide out. So when the water comes into a cave and deposits carbon dioxide, deposits calcium carbonate as a speleothem, it gives off carbon dioxide. So there's a balance in the system, and it's understanding the balance and the feedback loops within that. And Nico wants to go in here. This could become a long conversation.
In fact, Two of our three background pictures are good examples. The background picture behind Zoran shows the dissolution of limestone, and the picture in my background shows precipitation of calcium carbonate.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Very good.
Very good. Very good. And you mentioned temperature. Rising temperature not necessarily is going to increase precipitation
And of course, we now discussed the impact of CO2 or the relations between CO2 in the atmosphere and the KARST process. But there is something also very important. That's the impact of climate change on water resources, on groundwater resources in KARST. And this, of course, is also a very important and general topic. If we have changing patterns of temperature, which controls evapotranspiration, and changing patterns of precipitation, then we also achieve changing patterns of groundwater recharge. And in some regions, of course, this causes shortage of groundwater, declining groundwater tables, but not in all regions.
Yeah, very good. It's very complex, very nice. I love it. Now Zoran is showing off there. He's changing his picture.
No more dissolution, just to look for water.
Good.
May I also add something? In addition to what has been said, I all agree with, but only shortage of water has been exposed. While on the other side, my background picture
Exactly,
shows the floods. So there are several different aspects of extreme hydrological conditions that we should not forget about. And there is also different aspects that are connected to this different dynamics in karst hydrogeology. So also floods are important factors.
Very good. Guys, very nice talk to you. I would have so many more questions that wouldn't fit into this interview. Could you please make your final considerations, please?
I think that throughout this today's interview, we were trying to explain and present the peculiarities of karst and how it is different from other environments, but also the high dynamic nature of the processes that are driving this special environment. And this is also why karst is very vulnerable. And this brings on one side specific challenges that we should not be afraid of. But on the other side, we also pointed out that it brings a special opportunity. For example, John said that we can enter the aquifer actually with these specific karst features as caves. On the other side, these processes in karst are relatively fast, especially in terms of hydrology. So it offers us an observation on a human timescale, what can happen if something goes wrong. So we should not be afraid of these challenges. And the most important is that we try to understand them. And then with better knowledge, with better understanding, we can also find ways how to manage karst environment, the heritage and the water resources, and then to face these challenges. And we hope that this book will contribute to better understanding, and also that we have inspired new generations with this new book.
Our book is a hydrogeology book, which is therefore really focusing on water resources, on groundwater resources. But in fact, we should also keep in mind that we need a holistic approach for the protection of karst systems, also including all the other important ecosystem services and resources in karst, such as the ecosystems, the biodiversity, both at the land surface and in the underground, but also consider other aspects like the cultural or recreational aspects. And for example, if we look at the list of UNESCO World Cultural and Natural Heritage, we find a lot of caves and karst areas. And if we study the the history of the early history of man, we find practically all important remnants in karst areas, in caves and dolines. So it's I think groundwater is the most important treasure, but there is much more, and we should keep it in mind and also have an interdisciplinary research approach.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, I just really echo what's been said. We've got a really complicated system, but it's a really important system. And it's one of your questions, do we need more people to study karst? It does baffle me that karst is still such a small subject area. In Britain, I point out to my students that 2 of our 3 major sources of groundwater are in fact limestones, and they're karst. And yet on their course, they get a small amount of karst from me and a huge amount on other rocks. So what I would hope from this book is that we would encourage more students to think, hey, karst is actually a really interesting area to study. It's not actually very complicated when we get into it. Yes, we need to focus on it, but it is one that is more open to study. And one of the things perhaps you haven't picked up is that 2 of us, Natasha and myself, came into karst as geographers. And people think, oh, karst is a very heavy geology subject. Whereas, of course, Nico and Zoran have come in as geologists. But we come together in karst. I actually started as a surface water hydrologist, not as a hydrogeologist, because surface water hydrology has got a lot of things to talk about in terms of karst. An underground river is a surface stream with a roof. So through this book, I hope we'll say that actually there's a lot of different disciplines that come together in karst. And if I can just say one other thing, and that is I've really enjoyed working with my 3 colleagues on it, because in the course of this book, we've had a few arguments about things, not strong disagreements, but inevitably there are some disagreements over the ways that we've approached things. And it's really good to sort of learn from that. And hopefully the people who read the book will see it as something where 4 of us have come together and come to a common position at least.
Yeah, if I have to conclude, first I would like to thanks to my colleagues, to Natasha, John, and Nico, who really did the great effort to complete this task. The work took about 2 effective years, you know.
Mm.
We are not so efficient because so many other obligations we had in our shoulders. This is also fact, but at the end of the day, as also John said, we found a compromise, and I think we finally did a good thing. So, of course, that's a reader will judge finally, like always the case. We are aware that not karst is interesting to everybody, in fact, but if you consider the fact, as Nico mentioned, that the karst is a global phenomenon. It's 150 countries in the world possess karst in one or another landscape and the features. So this is also something that in the many parts of the world should be studied in a let's say with a specialist, of course. And those who have no specialist, they should look around and to learn from our books how to approach to the problems and maybe to whom to invite to help in a better understanding of the system and to establish sustainable way to manage the water and the soil, and also manage the flood and the drought, which Natasha mentioned, because this is also very typical in the some karstic regions. We had 200 days of flood and then 150 days of drought. So this is also something that is very common in karst in a specifically arid part of the world. So in fact, with this book, we try as much as possible to illustrate the book. Book contain 150 pages of the theory. Then there is additional 32 books boxes where the practical examples being presented that everybody can learn from some, let's say, figures, maps, sketches, and so. Then there are 34 questions and answers we provide also in the book, and the 7 exercises, 7 examples, then how we calculate, for instance, water availability, water resources, water budget. Some of this simple scheme, in fact, but it can help to some young specialists and maybe even the students to understand better how to come to the conclusion and how to do things in KARST in a sustainable manner, how to manage KARST in a sustainable way. So we are really happy to have this experience behind us. We started in the year 2021, which was the globally declared as International Year for Cave and Karst, which is very important. And due to the corona, that this year was extended into 2022 when we almost finished our work and made this draft. And finally, we are very happy that this book will come to this edition groundwater project, which is very important. This open access and opportunity to everybody that could learn without, paying, without financing, to learn. And this is very, important step towards better understanding of general water resources and water management, and specifically this hidden resource of the groundwater which we are dealing with. So thank you again for this opportunity, Everton, and thank you also to John Cherry and his team to put all these things together and to have such a fantastic edition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. I have the pleasure to talk to you. It's good to, I always say, when we love what we do, it's not work, right? It's so I can see you had fun working with it, which is important. And I had fun reading the book. So congratulations for such a nice work. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be a success. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much for the interview. It was really a very pleasant and nice interview. And thank you for the good mood, the good atmosphere you are spreading.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't in such a good mood 1 hour ago, but
guys.
now I feel really happy.
Thanks to you guys. Thank you very much. And I hope you meet you in person, not only in 2D. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.